So one of the things about computer science and programming in general is that things are sometimes really hard to figure out how difficult it is. So let me just kind of pull up an XKCD comic that kind of just illustrates this fact. Tasks. When a user takes a photo, the app should check whether they're in a national park. Sure, easy, just look, GIS lookup. Give me a few hours. And check whether the photo is of a bird. I'll need a research team in 5 years. In computer science, it can be hard to explain the difference between the easy and the virtually impossible. So it's sometimes very hard to figure out when you're starting out a problem, what is difficult and what is not. So I ran into that issue yesterday because when writing the Monte Carlo problem I was coming up with yesterday. And the Monte Carlo approximation game, Monte Carlo game I was doing was something called poker dice. All right. Nice. And it was a pretty interesting scam. Let me go ahead and pull up poker dice. Okay. So scroll. Poker dice are 6-sided dice, but they look a bit different. They look like this. Okay. They have, you have your ace, king, queen, jack, and then 9 and 10. Okay. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, you have ace. You have an ace, a jack, a king, a queen, and a 9 and a 10. Okay. And the scam was, and basically, if you've played poker, there are poker hands. There's flushes, there's straights, there's pairs, there's 4 of a kind, and the like. Okay. Now in this configuration, the game we were playing that the scammer asked you to play, aces are wild. Okay. And he says, well, I would be happy to, well, let's take turns rolling the dice. And whenever we roll a pair of a pair, you win. But whenever we roll a triple, 3 of a kind, I win. Okay. And so obviously pairs come up more than 3 of a pairs are worth less than 3 of a kind because they're statistically less often to show up. So obviously you would have the advantage here. They're statistically more often to show up. So you'd have the advantage, right? Well, it turns out with the addition of the rule of the ace of spades, that being wild, it actually becomes much easier for him to do to get 3 of a kind, and a pair is really hard. So, I mean, I would say, okay, let's simulate that. But here's the question. So where does the trickiness come in? Well, believe it or not, it was in the look for a pair. Is the hand a pair? Now, that doesn't necessarily sound hard at the glance of it, first observation, because I want to know if there's a pair. Okay, if 2 of the items are the same, I'm done. Except that's not the way it works in poker. In poker, right, if you've got, right, let's go ahead and just kind of let's go ahead and stop sharing for a second so that I can stop share. So I can kind of show you on my camera. Share. Actually, pin. Go ahead and pin my video. Right? This has 2 jacks and it's a pair. Okay, this has a pair, but this is not a pair. This is a 2 pair, which is different than a pair. Okay, that's a different hand. And furthermore, this is a full house, not a pair. And furthermore, if I had 3, that's a 3 of a kind is not a pair. It's different and distinct from one. Ooh, Ben, that's a good idea, except for one problem. It works for everything except for the fact aces are wild, so we still have some programming to do. Yes, it's pain. That's why I didn't do that one for the exam. I was like, I can't do this in 15 minutes when I'm tired. So my students can't do this in the time considerations that I'm creating. So so I went for a different a much more simpler program. Regardless. So in quiz 6, one of the questions is actually 2 questions and it's auto-gradable. And I have a rubric set out for both questions. And then the other question, the Monte Carlo one, I have to grade manually. Such is my life and such is my pain. It is so quiz 6 is due December. It is end of day December 6th. That is a hard deadline because I cannot assign anything later than that day because that is the final day of class. But you feel free to take at any point. It covers so it's going to cover file reading, dictionaries, and Monte Carlo approximations. And just so you understand, for the file reading, what I did, as I explained in the chat, is that I went through. So I had on the quiz correction form for quiz form 5, I had people list their 5 favorite movies. Yes, they are expected to be on the final too. So quiz 4 and 5, I had you all list your, if you could only watch 5 movies, right? For the rest of your life, what would those 5 movies be? And unfortunately, only one of you listed The Emperor's New Groove, which is, of course, the correct answer. Although I would also accept The Princess Bride. So that has been turned into the data file for that program, which is pretty cool. Although what I did is that if I saw stuff that was part of a trilogy, like somebody listing Star Wars, I put down, Star Wars, and I assumed that everybody was just talking Star Wars. Same with Lord of the Rings, but doesn't really change the answers too much. So, okay. So, and yes, so quiz 6 has a good amount on the it has some overlap with the final, but that's not a bad thing.
Wait, what about 4 and 5?
Quiz in 4 and 5?
Yeah, does the final include stuff from there too?
The final is cumulative. Everything on the semester, because everything you learn feeds into the next part of it. So, like, again, as I've mentioned, one of the questions on the final exam is Monte Carlo approximation of a game. Another question on final exam is something along the lines of, here's a file, please remove all the social security numbers from the file. A couple, and a year ago that was, please remove all the TU email addresses from this file. Okay. And then the last question is either going to be learning something new or it's going to be something else, which I would let you know, but it's probably about, but I always like the idea of giving you something you haven't really had exposure to. Here's the documentation. Please do this. My biggest warning for the final exam is please do not assume I'm an idiot. Do not assume I'm an idiot. Okay. I have some very clear policies about during the final exam about where you can go. But like stuff like Googling the answers for problems and then copying and pasting it. Don't assume I won't be able to recognize that. 10 people made that mistake last semester. And I had to submit 10 academic dishonesty forms as a result. So yeah, don't assume that I'm an idiot. Yeah, of course, you can use the regex stuff. Now, the final is going to be on Canvas because that's just easier for me to go through. I might do it on Runestone. I don't see why not. Yeah, it could probably be on Runestone. Give me a second although please give me a second. Probably actually makes more sense to do it on Runestone because you'd be able to do it in the browser if you need to. Give me a second to oh yeah, totally. I'm gonna pull up the rules for the final exam and then we'll get started on showing you something that I once wrote while I was waiting for a doctor's appointment. And it didn't take me much time to do at all. and yet is very, very, you can see it's used very, very quickly. Okay, so so for the final exam, okay, final exam. So when you hop on so the final exam, I've told you what to study for. I'm not really releasing a study guide other than the problems I've already told you about. Which is remove stuff from a file, and do a Monte Carlo approximation of a game. Quiz 6 is a pretty good guide there, but I don't really have time to write another study guide for that stuff. So give me a second. All right, so everybody can see the thing that's the final exam. I've given out I can give out practice stuff from my previous exam, but it might not from previous exams, but they'll be much longer and might not go everything, but I can give you some stuff that I've done for previous semesters. Okay, so let me go ahead and talk about this first. Okay.
I have one more question. When is the final exam?
That's a great question. I believe on the 14th of December. I'll send out a email. But again, the way you find that out is just go to the Temple website for the final exam calendar and look up our class information. That's the same way I find it out. And look under the 3 hours. Yes, this is a 4-hour course, but it's 3 lecture hours. So we look for the Tuesday, Thursday, 2 to 3:20. Okay. So first off, on the final exam, it's going to be on Zoom. You need to be on Zoom for this. I mean, it's highly recommended you're on Zoom for this because I need to be there so that you can ask me questions, right? The exam will be from from whatever the time is. So let's actually look that up. Temple final exam schedule 2021. Everybody can still see my screen?
I see your desktop.
Do you see my browser window? No. Oh, I bet you I went to the wrong one. Okay, give me a second. I'm going to share. I shared the wrong screen. Okay. There'll be 2 study. So here, boom. Yep. Tuesday, the 14th from 1 to 3. So I got it right. Okay. So again, just refer to this. I'll send out an email reminder in the upcoming weeks, but you'll want to be on Zooms just so you can ask questions. I'm not going to use Proctorio or require you to keep your cameras on. Honestly, there's 2 reasons for this. First, I'm not going to, I've heard some issues with Proctorio and I don't want to deal with tech support issues during the exam that are affecting people who are doing stuff. Second, if people are going to attempt to cheat, it probably will be not easy for me to detect during the exam, but it's easy for me to detect afterwards. Very easy. Okay. So final exam, open book, open note, open internet, open computer with the following caveats. Okay. Feel free to use any programming environment such as Idle or PyCharm. Do not communicate with anyone during the exam. Your work should be your own. If I find our questions posted on the internet, and your answers are sourced from there, you receive a 0. So in other words, if you post it on Chegg or some other or Homework Helper or something else, trust me, I'll be able to find it. And then trust me when I say I'll be able to figure out that you got it that way. And do not use the input function inside of do not use input inside of your functions unless you like losing your points. Your functions get data from the parameters. Don't use input, the prompting the user to enter something. That just slows down any kind of testing I can do. If you're gonna do that, do it outside of the functions, on the global level. Now, the one thing that you can do that really annoys me is if you grab something off the internet and you think it answers your question. And it's two things. It's a combination of two things. You grab something from off the internet and you think or hope it answers your question, and it doesn't adjust the prompt at all. Okay. And then the second thing you do is that you don't cite it. If you cite it, it's not, if you cite it, I'm not writing up an academic dishonesty form. But one thing you can, but still, right, if you grab something from the internet and it doesn't address the problem at all, that's not good for that question. Yes, you'll be able to test your code work. Feel free to use any programming environment, such as Idle or PyCharm, to write your code. In fact, I'll be providing you with sample input and output files for your for a lot of the file reading problems. I don't care where the citation is. I just care that it's there. Yes, you can cite it and modify it, please. Please. The big thing here is that like I have pretty much every student last semester, and I'm not going to say what it was specifically for exam security reasons, but they all Googled the same exact phrase, found the first link, copied the first link, only to find out, and the first link that they found it from did not address the prompt. It seemed to, but had they actually read the website, they would have realized it had not addressed the prompt. Okay. So, and the reason that I'm very hardcore about this, I guess I'm going to say, is because computer science is one of those things where people can go, yeah, the solution for this, it's this. Yeah, just no, not that, not new Looney Tunes. It's this, right? No, yeah, just type this, into your, just put this in to your script, and yeah, it's going to work just fine. In case you're wondering, that will freeze up your computer. It's not going to break anything. It just makes your computer unusable. Your laptop may be not able, it may make your laptop so unusable that you may not be able to turn it off until it runs out of battery. What it is a fork bomb. What it does is that it says for this program, make an identical subprogram or two identical subprograms. It's called a fork bomb. Very easy to do. Or let me go ahead and look up a previous exam for a completely different class I had, but you'll be able to get, you'll be able to see but this is just to kind of show that you need to be alert. Excellent question. How do you suggest you study? So, yeah, I do. I'm recalling now that I have some practice exams. So give me a second. Close this final exam window up. So GitHub teaching. Yeah, I did a systems programming class at some point. That was a fun thing. So yeah, exam one from that class, which was on midterm exam. Okay. All right, so it was teaching Linux kind of stuff. All right, so this was something that's been around for a while, and you can see it's a bit old because it uses some old Mac graphics and stuff. By the way, don't do any of this stuff on here, by the way, if you didn't catch that already. This is bad. Do not follow any of the directions and if you do follow the directions, I'm going to laugh at you because I just told you not to follow the directions. Okay. So, so this is something that gets posted on the internet every so often. Is your Apple Mac feeling slow? This could be due to high levels of uptime accumulating when you don't restart for a while. How to refresh your Mac. To do this, simply, again, don't do this. Like seriously, do not do this. To resolve this issue, refresh your Mac by opening the terminal and type in sudo rm-rf/* without the quotes and then press return. So if you do this, it tells you, and it looks nice, and it looks nicely formatted so you can trust it. Sudo means do, and rm means ready machine, and -rf means refresh. Those are complete lies again. Yeah, this is essentially this Windows version. This is essentially the Mac version of, or the Unix version of delete system32. It removes all the data from the computer forcefully. RM is the remove command. -R means recursively, meaning go into all the subfolders. RF, do so without any prompts from the user. The F means don't prompt the user, just do it. Sudo means administrative access. /* means, well, root and everything inside the root. So yeah, don't, again, this is why it's dangerous to just copy paste code on the internet that you don't know what it does. It's just kind of my warning to you, because again, you don't want to do any of this stuff in here, because it is it's just one of those commands. If you know what if you've worked with your terminal before, then, and worked with any significant thing, you know RM is remove. It's not ready machine. So yeah. Now, as far as let me go ahead and dive into my my folders. I may actually, I was like, no, I'm not going to make something, and then I realized, wait a second, I may actually have a practice final exam. Give me a second. There's a makeup exam for, yeah. So this is a bit older, I think. As you can see, it was done on paper, and before I went to the 3-question format that I've become so fond of. So this one had write a script that, given a text file, finds and returns all superhero words in it, which are words that end with man, woman, boy, or girl, such as Supergirl or Batboy. Okay. So given a text file, find and return all the words with superhero words in it. That seems actually like a question that would be useful to study for on exam. These questions, Project Euler problem 5 is palindrome. Make a username is permutation. Just some basic stuff that I wanted to say. Given the name of the text file, return the sum of all. So this was just basic file reading and stuff. Let me go ahead and see the final exam, what we had. Oh, I don't use any of this stuff in here anymore. So this was an old final, so that's fine. So I had some regex questions when I mandated regex in that question. Write a function that will place all the strings. So this one, again, this is very similar to what I would be doing, and I think I've done this in class. Method writing, these are good, just practice problems, but they won't necessarily have you practice. And I used to give this problem. Make sure you can do this problem. This is kind of like the, wait, did you actually learn how to program question? And then here, I used to use this one. This was actually in the exam last semester, which was about sets, which I've gone over a couple times in class, so I'm not going to use it now. But there's some questions. But basically, you want to do some Monte Carlo approximations, simulate a game. So again, the 3 questions are something that resembles, I'll send these out, but you'll want to do first question, you want to do something that resembles this, reading and writing from a file name. Okay, reading and writing a file and basically filtering out stuff. I mean, like if I had remembered about this and not passed it around, the back question would have been good. Like, yeah. Yeah. So like this, right? Given a text file returns in all the superhero words in it, which are words that end with the words. And when we get back from the break, I will go through these. I will go through some of these. I don't know. It was all over the place last semester. Your solution should involve opening a file, reading line by line, and using find all. The important part here is the regex to use, which might look something like this. Regular expression, are, man or woman or boy or girl. And then this one was a good one. Make username. Let's see. If you want more practice on regular expressions, create a regular expression. I'll send out a bunch of these. Okay. So I have I have plenty of practice problems. If you're interested in more practice, I highly recommend a couple of places to go. Project Euler. And just start working from the first problem and go up as high as you can. The first 100 problems are, the first couple of problems should be within your grasp, but once we get higher into stuff like lattice paths, that's going to involve quite a bit of learning a lot of stuff. Other things you might want to try is coming out soon, just to get better. It is almost December, which means it's almost time for Advent of Code, which will unlock on December 1st. Advent of Code is 25 days of programming challenges, two problems a day. They're generally story-based problems that are themed around saving Christmas. And they're pretty fun. So again, the first problem, we're going to be manipulating something. Second one is Monte Carlo approximations. You'll be simulating a child's game, by the way. So nothing with too complex with rules that are too complete. It's also going to be a cooperative game, meaning that you can that basically you're just seeing how often does the team win versus the team lose. It's not going to be too drastic of a thing to. And furthermore, when I do the questions, again, I break them up into subparts so that you can understand, so that you'll see where, and if you take quiz 6, you'll see what I mean by breaking up problems into subparts. Okay. So let's go ahead and work on a task today. So I have been on and off for way too long and starting and stopping again, learning Japanese. Okay. Now because I am a parent and schedules are terrible and also I don't like paying for courses, I have been using a course that's been around since the 90s called Irashai, done by Georgia Public Broadcasting, part of PBS. PBS is awesome, by the way. You should support your local PBS station. Irashai is a Japanese, is a high school level Japanese course, catering to people in high school. So a lot of the school stuff and family stuff are from the perspective of somebody who might be in school or in college. For instance, I still don't know how to say this person is my son in Japanese, but I know how to say this person is my older brother or this person's my younger brother. Or actually, I completely forget how. Point being is, forget what imoto is. Is it older or younger? Darn. Oh well. Point being is that they've got a bunch of lessons here, and that's pretty cool. It's completely free, and each lesson comes with, if I can pull it up here, and trust me, this has an application here. Each lesson comes with a check sheet, video check sheet, something to work on while you're basically, am I getting this? Trace the following hiragana. And there's one for each lesson. So if I go to lesson 50 in the URL, Mark the following kanjis for each of the following days of the week with the appropriate reading. Match the hiragana with the counterparts, right? I've got a lot of different kinds of. I've got a lot of different PDFs. Now, suppose I wanted to print out all these PDFs. So without there automatically being one for me, what would I have to do? I'd have to click on one, wait for the page to load up, which involves loading the video. Go down here, remember to hit the one that isn't already pre-filled out, that answer key, and click on it and download it. Now, if you're clever, you might notice, wait a second, the URL is the same for all of these things. So if I wanted lesson 15, I just type in 15 over here, right? Makes sense so far? But still, I'd have to, literally save everything, which is frustrating. Oh, and it gets even better, right? That's just the saving the part of the document. Suppose I want to print everything out. And if I'm just doing the first season, that is 73 print operations I have to do, right? I have to print 73 separate documents. So does everybody see what the difficulty is here? That's a very time-consuming thing to do, to print out all the exercises, right? Agreement or disagreement? So now you may recognize this task, even though you may have not done this for this specific website, right? You're like, oh my God, this thing has a list of PDFs and I just need to, it's something I have to just go through and it's a pain. Well, fortunately, we can actually automate this because there are two separate tasks here. The first task is these PDFs are on another computer somewhere. Specifically, they're on Georgia Public Broadcasting's web server. Okay. So get those documents onto my computer, not on the web server, please. And once I have them, and then the second task, which I'll write a separate program for, is once they're on my computer, let's take them from being a separate PDF, from being a bunch of separate PDF files, and merging them into one PDF file. Okay. Now, this is going to require us to use two separate libraries that are not built into Python for it to do it easy. The first library we're going to do, we've already seen, which is we are going to, if you haven't done this yet, pip install requests. You don't have to follow along with me. You can just watch. But if you want to do it on your computer as well, you will have to do this. Pip install requests. Okay, and it just gave me that message because it's already there. And then I think I have to do pip install PyPDF is the other one, which is for Python and using PDFs. How do you access the terminal for a Mac? You go to Finder, type in terminal. Did that work? Go and search for your applications and just search for terminal. Start getting to know your terminal, by the way. It's very boring, but it's very powerful. Okay. So let me go ahead and I'm going to follow some notes I have already kind of because, I did this when I was much more familiar with each of these libraries. And as I've mentioned before, knowing a bunch, it's all about knowing what you've done in the past. So let's see. What's the main difference between the main temporal on your computer and the terminal inside an IDE like Jupyter or VS Code? Nothing really. There's no functional difference. The functional difference is where it is convenience. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm looking for the appropriate files. Control F, downloader. Oh, what am I doing? It's already. I don't need any of that. It's already there. Okay. There we go. So let's go ahead and get started with this. I didn't need to do any of that. So get started. Screen 3. So is everybody seeing me move the window around? Just making sure I'm on the right window.
Moving the window around, or you mean the cursor?
Let's see, screen share. So everybody see the coding window?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay, great. Cool. Let's just want to make sure. So let's go ahead and call this Control S. So we're going to go ahead and go into Documents, GitHub, Classroom, ITP, down Japanese downloader, not PY. Get rid of the file extension so it doesn't. And there we go. So first thing we need to do is that we need to import requests. Run it to make sure that it works. Great. Next, we need to find the URL for these things. Now I went ahead and, sorry. So in 1 second, I went ahead and I went through these PDFs already. Okay. Now they used to be located somewhere else, and now when they revamped this website, they moved it somewhere. They moved the location as well. But the only thing this matters for is that like here, document 15 follows this URL. Okay. Where it's 2020-04. And this is just found out by just looking at the URLs. The only exception is document 1, which ends with a -0. So that one's going to have to be handled differently. Okay. But what we're going to do is that we're going to make note of this base URL. Does that make sense? All the files have this base URL, and then they go up based on which episode it corresponds to. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say base URL is equal to, and I'm going to do a string, and it's this. Okay. So now what now the way it works again is that there are, let's see, I believe it goes up. So we have 15. So we start at lesson 1 and it goes all the way up to 73. And then let's see. So and then I think 73 is the last episode. So if I try to go to 74 PDF, it doesn't go. So what I need is actually the base URL is more along the lines of this, right? Because everything has this default gpd.org sites default files 2020-04/1 bar and then the file name. And the only exception to the file name rule is 1.pdf, which for some reason is named 1-0. I don't know why. It's fine. It's all fine. So we can kind of just, what we're going to do is that we're going to use that first one though as a kind of practice. So I'm going to say target is equal to base URL. So we want to get the very first one, plus it had 1-0.pdf attached to it, right? And so we learned that the way we get something from from requests is just very simple. How do we get the document from online, be it an HTML file? We did this for HTML files last time, but all we have to do to grab an HTML file or any file from the internet using requests is say request.get target. And then that gets stored in a response. All I have to do to grab something from the internet. Python is beautiful because it makes it really simple. And it's telling me 404 not found. 404 not found. So why did I get a 404 error? Great question. It's probably because your professor is messed up something. What did I mess up? Let's go ahead and instead of target, we'll just do, let's just go ahead and make sure that this does. It's not a bar, it's an L. Issue with font, by the way, that's where font, why I sometimes get obsessed about fonts. Because fonts make all the difference. Being able to read the difference between I's, ones, L's, and bars. And there, we got a response 200, which means we got it. We got it back. So now, okay, I got it. Now what? Okay. Well, now let's go ahead and write this file to somewhere. Output file, or let's call it saved file, is equal to, and now this is going to be a bit different, right? How do we do this for opening to save a file, right? We remember how to how to write a file. This works just like anything else, right? Where to read a file, we do open. To open the file name. To write a file, we do the file name. We're going to call it o1.pdf. Because we're dealing with two-dimensional, with two-digit stuff. So o1.pdf. And then here's the only change. I'm going to put W, and then I'm going to put B. Now, WB is not for Warner Brothers or the Warner sister dot. Okay. It is for write, and then the B lets Python know that it is binary. A binary file. Now, what does that mean to be a binary file? That means, again, it means that we are writing a file that is not meant for a human to natively read the source code. It is meant to be opened by a program, which then gets displayed to the human. Okay? Okay. Did not. So, saved. So here, that's all I have to do. Save. And now how do I write it? How do I write this binary file? Well, Python makes it pretty simple. It's once you see it, it's pretty easy to remember. You're not going to have to know this for the final exam. No, nobody asked that, but I know somebody was panically thinking that. This is just kind of an example of using what we've learned plus some additional stuff. And I'm just going to use a bit of magic right here. Okay, which is for keys for chunk in response. So remember, we got the response from our request. From the response is the file we got back. So for chunk in response dot iter content, and then basically we're going to read. Lynn, did you do pip install requests? Then I'm not sure why. Don't worry about it right now too much. So this is going to read chunks in terms of, let's see, 100,000 kilobytes, whatever. For every chunk basically of the file, we're going to just read a bunch of ones and zeros. It might be, this might be 100,000 kilobytes. So for every 100,000 kilobytes, let's see. for every 100,000 kilobytes, we just want to write that. And we write that the same way we've been writing anything else, which is saved file dot write the chunk. So for every chunk in the file, we are going to write that. And now we did that. No worries, don't worry about it. And now if I go to the classroom folder where I've been doing this in, we see now that there is a O1 PDF file there. It wasn't there before. And I'm gonna, do the whole magician thing. Look, there's nothing up my sleeve. I've deleted it. Now I run it again. And now suddenly there's a file there. Pip install requests on the terminal.
Wouldn't you want to create like a folder inside that?
That
so
is the
it's
next.
not just...
Yes. Ezra,
Alright.
once again, you have accurately predicted the next step. So as Ezra was pointing out, yes, next step is to put this into a folder, because if we're going to download a bunch of them, we don't want to clutter up our what we're seeing, right? So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to download it to is I'm going to I'm going to create a folder called let's call it saved/01. So I'm going to create a folder called saved, and this is where we run into just the first problem, the one problem, which is saying there's no file directory for this, which we don't really, and what it's saying is that it can't save it there, because in order to save it in a folder, if we want to save something in a folder, that folder already has to exist, or we have to make it manually somewhere else. So once I create a folder called saved so that this can go in, so that things can get saved there, it will save it in there. And then we can see that, there we go. We've got our first PDF there. Okay. So now, again, the first one was an exception to how this all worked, right? So the way that we're going to do this is that we will do this in a for loop. And I'm just going to, rather than indenting stuff, I'm just going to do this, redo this all again. Okay. Just so we get that. So what we're going to do is that we added one, and again, the first file was unique, was weird. Do .pdf over there. So first one was unique. Don't worry about it. So the file extension was the numbers go from 2 up to, but not including 74. We know how to make use of that information. For file num in range from 2 to, let's go with 1 to, yeah, let's automate the whole thing. 1 to up to, but not including 74. All right. Well, I'm going to start with 2 actually, because, and then I'll create an exception for 1. Okay. And then we're gonna continually clean this up. Okay. And hopefully the server's not going to get too mad at me. But I mean, it's much less than a video, so I don't suspect they will. So for each of those, I got to figure out what my target URL for that file is. And so the target is going to be equal to that base URL we've already computed. I'll grab it so it's easier. I'll grab it down here so that we can see it a bit easier. Okay, base URL plus. And now we need to do file num. But remember, file num is an integer, so we're going to turn it into a string. This is the one thing I really detest in Python, where I have to convert things to strings in order to add them to a string. And in Java, it will do it automatically. And I will not stop complaining about this. Okay, it's like, mind you, I complain about a lot of stuff about Java that Python's able to do. Okay, so that's our target. So let's go ahead and just print out our targets. Print our target URLs to make sure that this is something sane, right? And here's all those URLs, and I can test by control clicking, and look at that. Boom. Okay, next, what am I going to do? Okay, now that I've got the target, let's go ahead and download it. We do that by using requests dot get the target URL. And then we do that, and then we store that in a response. Okay. Once we have our response, we need to create a place to save it. So saved file is equal to open and then let's go ahead and split this up into one step over here. Split this up into same saved file name. It's going to be file num plus. There's a reason I'm doing it. I'm going to do it like this. It's going to go into lesson slash. That means inside the lesson folder, create a file that's equal to the file number and then do .pdf. Okay, so now open save file name and then write binary because it's a binary file. And then for every chunk in response dot iter content, and it's just, and this bytes over here is just telling it how many to read at once. Doesn't really matter how much I put in. I don't think probably matters a whole lot. Saved file dot write. And then we're going to write that chunk. And then one thing I should mention that I should do since I'm writing a bunch of files is that when I'm done writing it, I'll go ahead and say saved file dot close to say I'm done with it. And that way it will be registered. So, and now if we now if I run this, I'm going to say print saved us, and then I'll say saved file name. Now let's run it and watch what happens. Oh, no such file directory lesson. Oh, I didn't mean lesson. Say we called the folder saved. So there, save 2, save 3, save 4, save 5, 6, 7. So it's going, and notice it's like not printing out super fast, which means actually if we go to this, oh, look, we see the files slowly populating over here. And they're not just blank files. They're the actual files that are from that thing. Let's go ahead and terminate this. Why am I terminating this early? Well, there is kind of two problems here. The first is that we've got file one. If we really want to automate it so that we can replicate this on any computer, I want to make sure I don't have to handle one manually. That's just going to be annoying. Okay. And the second thing is, look at this. When we sort file names, they get sorted alphabetically. Although at least when we move to the next space, it'll get sorted out automatically. So what we're going to want to do, because we're dealing with 2-digit numbers over here, is that we are going to want to prepend a 0 to all our 10 to all of our 1-digit numbers. So we'll want a 02, a 03, a 04. So what we're going to do over here is two things. First, let's go ahead and change this from. And all this is, so the first thing is that what this is going to do is that it's going to change what our target is, but only for the first one. So if yeah, and I can just do this here. If if file num equal 1. So if file number is equal to 1, then instead we want to replace target with, I'm just going to be lazy here. I'll replace it with this because that's what we needed to do for the first file. It's a weird one. It's the only exception for this. But now if I run it, again, let's go ahead and just delete Control A, delete. Let's go ahead and boop, boop. Just run this now. And now and now one's included in our download process. Great. And now the other part for prepending a 0 to make everything 2 digits long, that's going to just affect, this is why I did saved file name as something different, which is, so we're going to do if. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to do this the more correct way, which is I should have save file name is equal to if file num is less than or equal to 9, else we behave as we've been doing so far. But otherwise, what we're going to do is we'll want to do a saved and then put a 0 in front of that. Okay. And now when we run this, saved 01, 02, 03, 04, 05, 06, 07. And now I'll let it complete. So that's pretty cool. That's our first task done, which is just downloading a bunch of PDFs. And let me see. Let me just quickly look up the other library, the other module while we're doing this. Hi, PDF 2. Okay. Wait, there's a PyPDF 4 now? Okay. Whatever. PyPDF 2, is there an issue with PyPDF 2? No? Okay. Yeah. So now for the other one, to use our second library to manipulate PDFs, we are going to use PyPDF 2. So first thing I need to do is zoom, open this up. Pip install PyPDF 2, enter. Boom. And it's installed it, and it's installed it. Boom. So now I've got PyPDF 2 installed. So now our second program is that, so now the reason why this is, I've got all these PDF files. But again, as we discussed, printing them is a bit of a pain. And you can look on the internet and like pretty much everything that you want to use to, how do you merge like 50 PDFs together into one PDF? Like you need either Adobe, which we have, I believe, but that's like learning an entirely new thing. Or, there's some programs that look, I believe what is the parlance of youth these days, totally sus. That may be a year dated though. Sketchy always works. They really look, well, there's a lot of programs that purport to do this stuff that look like they really will be wanting to advertise their worthless antivirus software to you, which is, and again, the task I want to do is take these files, 73 files, which is 5.5 megabytes, and just merge them into one file so that when I go to the printer, I only have one file to print, as opposed to printing out, having to print these all out, and, even if I just open them all up at the same time, pretty much every computer hates that. I've not met a computer that doesn't hate opening tons and tons of files all at once. So what we're going to do is that we're going to use something called PyPDF. If you're more interested in this, Automate the Boring Stuff has an entire chapter on this. And I'm just going to be referencing some notes I have on this one. So I'm going to call this Japanese PDF merger, because that's what it's going to be doing. Why? Boom. Okay. So what we're going to need, we're going to need to use two libraries. The first of which is built into Python, the OS library, which is short for operating system. And the second is PyPDF2. And that one, this one doesn't sound as hazardous as it might be. It's routines to basically make sure that we're like paths and stuff are work for all the operating systems. It does stuff like getting all the names of all the files in the folder you're currently in, or in another folder, like this. Okay. Like, because if we want to merge together all the files using some Python, we're going to need a list of all the file names, right? So like, for instance, OS has some really cool stuff in here. CPU count. Let's just, I want to see that. Does that work? We get to brag. Let's see. It says built-in function CPU. Oh, it's a function, so we have to call it, right? 8. Yes, that's pretty cool. So it does tell you this kind of stuff. So you can figure out like, so it has some information for your operating system, right? We can look at the documentation later. It's got some really cool stuff in here that you mostly don't need. But the most important thing that for us that's useful are the pathing ones and os.listdir. Which sounds like somebody forgot, which sounds like somebody's trying to be insulting. Dir. You know, you want to list it, dir. But no, list directory sounds, it is basically what we're saying here is that we'd like to list all the files in this directory. And if we do so, boom. Here's all the files in the saved directory. Here's all the files in dot, which is the current directory, which is various questions the like I have. Only thing we really need from OS. The second thing we're going to use, okay? So, and I'll just go ahead and save this to, I'm going to save this as PDF files. PDF file names. Okay, because they're not the files themselves, they're the file names. Okay, and the next thing I want to do is say PDF file names is equal to sorted PDF file names. Now we haven't really talked about sorted and sort yet. So what they do though is the most common task and one of the most common tasks in computer science, which is sort something. And this is just to ensure that everything is in numerical order. I believe it is. Oh no, it's not. Yep, everything's in numerical order because you were lucky there. But if in case they weren't, now this will arrange it in order, in alphabetical order for us. Okay, so that's great. Sorted, and the reason we do the return is because sorted, I believe, returns a completely new list. It doesn't change the list you were working on. Okay. Is everybody following me so far? I know this is all completely new stuff, but like part of this is also to show that you guys can really follow along and learn very well with completely new things. It's not an issue anymore, right? You've learned how to learn. Okay. Now we're going to show you how to use the PDF system. So, or PyPDF. Okay. So what we're going to do is that we are going to create a PDF file in memory using PDF Writer. And then what we're going to do, or using PyPDF, and then when we're done writing it, we're going to do exactly what we did over here, which is open a file and save it. Okay. So what we're going to use is PDF Writer is equal to PyPDF2 PDF file writer. This creates a new object that does that. Okay. And again, an object's like a noun in our programming language that has specific data and specific things that it does. All right. So now for target in PDF file names. So for every one of the PDFs that we have, okay, for each of those file names, we are going to say, let's go ahead and say PDF file is equal to open. We're going to go ahead and open that PDF file up. Nothing's stopping us from opening up a binary file. But if we're opening up a file, guess what we put here instead of R? It's RB. Okay, so we put RB over here instead of that. Okay, and now what we're going to do is that, however, we can't really interact with this because Python doesn't natively handle PDF files to read with. So what we do is we say PDF reader is equal to py-pdf2 dot PDF file reader, and we're going to read that PDF file specifically. So we're going to read this PDF file. Okay. Okay. And now what we do is actually fairly straightforward, right? PDF files have pages. So for page num in range PDF.num pages. PDF reader pages. So for whatever the page number is, we're going to say page. We're going to get that page. PDF reader dot get, get page. Page number. Now PDF writer dot add page. So we're adding a page to our blank, to our new PDF file, which is what the PDF writer is for. Right. So what we do. So. And that's it for reading, essentially. To read all the files, all we do is saying, hey, for each one of these guys. All right, I need the forgot a very important. No, wait, target. It should already have the PDF, so I didn't forget anything. So now we get the file, we read that file. For every page in that, we read it, we get that page, and we add it to our writer. Now, last part. Output file is equal to, so this is going to look slightly different, but at the same time, open, saved. Let's call it mega file, because I can name it whatever I want, and mega sounds mega awesome. We're going to write a binary file. So now PDF writer. Now what we do is that now that we have this output path, we can tell our PDF writer to write to the output file. And then output dot. Now with an electronic textbook with me, this took about as much time as I was spending in the waiting room of a doctor's office, because that's literally when I wrote this the first time. The whole thing, the first part and the second part. Okay. Extras payable ID numbers for objects will be corrected. Okay. And now I ran it, I believe. And so now if we go into here, we have mega file now, which is 94 pages long and goes from 1, lesson 4, lesson 9, all the way up to the last one. So I've successfully merged it. So now I could send this single file to the printer rather than opening up and printing 73 files. I think we spent about 40 minutes, 45 minutes on this while I was explaining this. And I feel we'd still be, I do feel that strongly that we'd still be trying to print out the files individually and running to check to make sure it was still going. So what does the OS module do again? The OS module allows you to do, things to interact with your file system and operating system. OS Python, let's see. Miscellaneous operating system interface. So it basically anything for dealing with your operating system that is a bit more than you need the open function for. That's what you use OS for. So listing all the file, and we use that for one purpose and one person. One purpose only. And that purpose was over here, listing all the files in the directory saved, which was this directory where we put all the PDFs. So this is, even if this is your only programming class, you can see that this is a task that comes up every so often. And especially, okay, maybe if we were doing 74 files, we might be done. But what if it was the fact, well, here's the thing. This isn't just one season. It is actually 2 seasons worth of things. And we didn't do even any of season 2. But that's still not a problem because guess what? Season 2 follows the same format, which is that it will have the same format over here. So we could just run it on a different set of URLs. Change the target up a bit, and that's it. That's all we needed. And then whereas for the first time, to do the second batch of the second season, if you're doing it manually, it takes you just as long to do the first time. But if you're doing it automatically, well, we have a script already. It takes us no time whatsoever, other than just adjusting our target. Okay. And with that, I am done with class.